So I want to welcome everyone, Chodesh Tov, and I want to introduce our esteemed guest today. Rabbi Ken Spiro is an internationally acclaimed speaker whose fast-paced, humorous, and intellectual, powerful presentations captivate audiences from the first moment, renowned for his ability to make complex ideas clear, compelling, and unforgettable. He delivers talks that educate, entertain, and leave a lasting impression. He is a senior lecturer at Aish Torah in Jerusalem. Ken Spiro is also a licensed Israel Ministry of Tourism guide, bringing history vividly to life with rare depth and firsthand insight. His academic background includes degrees in Russian language and literature, BA from Vassar, history, MA Norwich University, and rabbinic ordination, Yeshiva Aish Torah, grounding his presentations in rigorous scholarship while keeping them accessible to diverse audiences. Ken Spiro has appeared on major international media outlets, including Fox, BBC Radio and Television, National Geographic, Discovery Channel, History Channel, Channel 4, and Israel National Radio. He's the best-selling author of WorldPerfect, The Jewish Impact on Civilization, Crash Course in Jewish History and Destiny, Why a Tiny Nation Plays Such a Huge Role in History. He was born in the U.S., and he's been living in Israel since 1982. He's out of Israel for just a little bit longer. He is a former IDF combat infantry soldier and a father of 5. He's based mainly in Jerusalem. He speaks worldwide for conferences, federations, universities, synagogues, and leadership events, delivering programs that are as thought-provoking as they are unforgettable. And with that, I would like to welcome you. Thank you so much for coming on. And
I'm having me on, Naomi.
I can't wait to hear. Go ahead.
Okay. So I know you've had a bunch of speakers on that have been talking about we're all in the middle of yet another war. I'm having FOMO. I think Israelis and Jews, the only people who have FOMO when most people, when there's a war going on, they flee the country if they can. I just want to go back. I've temporarily relocated to the States for the first time in many decades. Um, but I'm still feeling it from far away, and this is not the first conflict. I was previous attacks of Iran on Israel. I was in the country for, but really big things are happening in the world. The problem with really transformative events, especially as Jews, is our whole history is so supernatural. The highs and the lows violate all the laws of human history. I mean, no one has a history like ours. So we take, if weird and supernatural, even if it doesn't involve suspension of the laws of nature, like the sea splitting, like it did at Yam Suf in the Exodus narrative, supernatural can be nonetheless very supernatural, even though it's hidden, a la the last holiday we just had, which was Purim. And Purim is really how history has worked from the Second Temple period onward for the last 2,500 years. We don't have those open miracles. We don't have prophecy, unfortunately. But God is nonetheless behind the scenes working, just as we know in the Purim story. His name doesn't appear anywhere. But at the end of the story, within a year of the Purim narrative ending and the supernatural salvation from a potential genocide, the rabbis got together and decided this is definitely the Yad Hashem, the hand of God, and this is a holiday. It's a rabbinic holiday. So too, we're in the middle of such transformative events that are coming so quickly. Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, when he wrote his book, and he was killed by the Nazis in 1941, he wrote a book called Ikvasa de Mashiach, as we are, in the footsteps of the Messiah, and he uses an analogy of all of human history as like a pregnancy, and the end of days is like the delivery when the woman's in labor. And I know I have to apologize. Men should not talk about women giving birth. The closest thing I've ever come to experiencing that is a kidney stone. But he says that a woman has contractions because if all of the intense stuff would come without any breaks, she might die in childbirth, heaven forbid. That's exactly the words he uses. But things speed up and get more and more intense. And that's what's going on sort of on a spiritual, metaphysical level. I always say I'm not a prophet. If I was, I'd be working in financial markets in Wall Street. I wouldn't be an educator. I could make a fortune. But you don't have to be a prophet to see that the Zohar says this too. It says the exact date of the Messiah isn't known, but as it gets close, even a child will be able to make the calculation. So, and it's getting very, very close. Things are moving so fast, and we're approaching the end. We just don't have the perspective because we are in the middle of it. So that's the one thing we really need to be aware of. I'm in America now, and people are adding extra Tehillim, but I don't think people realize the Jewish communities here in places like Muncie, where I'm located now, that things are moving really, 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 really fast. I mean, again, I can't put a date on it, but everything's lining up. The convergence between, you know, prophecy, Gog and Magog, and Zechariah and Ezekiel, and a lot of the sources and what's going on a daily basis and the headlines we're hearing in the news is really, really unbelievable. But I'm sure you've had other people, I know you've had other people on talking about that. So I don't want to focus so much on that. I'm a historian and a rabbi. I always say I wear two hats. So I wanted to pull out and focus on something that probably you haven't addressed with previous people you've talked with on your podcast. But that's like what's at stake, more on a geopolitical level that people have to realize. So we always have to keep and running in back of our head that there's a God who's, running the show, but we're not supposed to rely on miracles. Ein somchin al hanes. And we for ourselves have to act in the world in a real way. And we have to make others around us aware of the battle that's going on. The problem is today in the world in general, and it's very interesting, just to go back to one more Torah source. The Mishnah, which was composed 1800 years ago, is not a prophetic work. It's a codification of Jewish law to keep it from being forgotten, put together by Yehuda Hanassi. So it doesn't go into this stuff. But in the ninth parak of Sota, the segment of the Mishnah that's called Sota, is the only place where it really delves into this. And it talks about Ikvus of the Mashiach, what's going to happen before the Messiah comes. And it's unbelievable. I've been reading this for decades and watching, an abundance of products, yet they'll be expensive, which doesn't make sense according to the law of supply and demand. If you have an abundance, price goes down, but that didn't factor in thousands of years ago. Modern monetary policy, money is a commodity. If you print too much of it, so you have to spend more of it to get the same item. It's called inflation. Um, it talks about the breakdown of the family, that people don't respect old people anymore because they can't use technology and flip fast enough. It makes all kinds of amazing statements that there be no leadership in the world, no real leadership. By the way, it's talking about the Jewish world. Unfortunately, we don't really hear people at the top of the rabbinic Jewish world, in my opinion, not to delve into this dangerous topic, saying the really heavy messages the Klal Yisrael needs to hear. But it says, Va'emet tenederet, and truth will be absent. And it's a really interesting way of putting it. What does it mean, truth will be absent? So people years ago were arguing about, economic systems. We're talking about whether communism or capitalism, but now people argue over biological realities. Men can be women, women can be. It's crazy stuff. I'm still waiting for the I don't recognize gravity movement. That'll end very quickly. But the term used for absent comes from the word eder, which is a herd of animals. And Chazal, the rabbis, say that as we approach the end of days, the world will divide into two camps, two herds of animals that will have nothing to do with each other. And anyone who's been around long enough to see what's been happening in the world, and it's been speeding up tremendously, sees that there's no middle anymore. There's no middle anymore. Everything is the extremes. It's sort of like people are numbed by normalcy, so they need more extremes to wake them up. And we see with social media, if you want to get more clicks and more watches and more likes and more subscriptions, you have to be like more ridiculous, more extreme. Look at politics. And again, I'm in America now, so I'm watching what's going on. You have MAGA on the right, and you have the left, and then Democrats who used to be kind of centrist, they're being pulled to the left, like in the Democratic Party. It's the biggest surprise in politics, in my opinion, in the last 10 years is John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, who was for a long period of time acting really crazy and saying dumb stuff. And now he's the most sane Democrat in the Democratic Party, in my opinion. He's a real centrist. But the Republicans also, you have extremes. It's the horseshoe theory. You got people on the right, and you could see it metastasizing with people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and the most disgusting human being on the planet, Nick Fuentes. And you get on the left also, you're getting crazy alliances. Everything is kind of spinning out of control. That's a very dangerous situation for the world to be in when we're confronting evil because no one is approaching it in a normal way. And that now I want to pull out and focus on what was the elephant in the room in the world today. And the media is talking about Islam in general and Shiite 12 or Islam, which is the religion of Iran specifically. And I do talks on this all the time. Um, Mainstream Islamic worldview, I don't know, it's not PC, but God is not PC and reality is not PC, is not a peaceful worldview. I mean, the short version of that class is basically that they believe they're the final faith, that the Jews got it wrong, that the Christians got it wrong, that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets and he got it right, and the whole world is destined to become Dar al-Islam, an Islamic world. Until that time, it's divided into Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, the world of Islam and the world of war. And through what idea is Dar al-Harb, the world of the infidel, the world of war, brought into Dar al-Islam? When I say brought into it, doesn't necessarily mean converted into, but physically conquered by, through the idea of jihad, which doesn't mean holy war, but is interpreted as holy war. That's number one idea. So that's already Islam of the three monotheistic faiths. We're the original mothership, and Christianity and Islam have branched off later in history. We're the most tolerant. We don't believe in physical conquest. I always jokingly say the only Jewish empire in history has been Hollywood and possibly the A-bomb and Robert Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project. So we're not into physical conquest. And we make it hard to convert. Proper Orthodox conversion, traditional conversion, could take a long time. Christianity believes in converting people, but isn't into so much the idea of physical conquest. It's more about spiritual conquest. Islam believes arguably more in physical conquest than anything else. This is mainstream Islam. And unlike Christianity, which went through reformations and normalization and chilling out, and now I say, I wish Europe were more Christian. I wish America were more, not extreme, but more. Uh, but they've become more tolerant. They've dropped a lot of the canards and horrible things they said about Jews, that the Arab Islamic world today about blood libels and all kinds of accusations. Israeli soldiers harvesting Palestinian organs in Gaza. That's why they went to war. The Islamic world has never gone through such a reformation or transformation. Now, I'm not saying that all Muslims are crazy jihadis. That's not true. I think the majority of Muslims are minding their own business and just wanting to get by day to day. But Islamism, radical Islam, political Islam, when expressed in the form it can be expressed in, is extremely expansionist, dangerous, and toxic to the world. And you see the combination of Europe that's lost its identity, it's lost its Christian faith, is wrought by guilt about all their colonialism, as if Europeans are the only people to enslave and conquer. Everyone everywhere in human history has done this. Being overrun and also having no babies anymore, because no country in the OECD, the Developed World Nation Organization, besides Israel, has above replacement birth rates, combined with Muslims who are very particularistic in the most part, many of them whose parents fled to these countries, including America, to escape the oppression of the Middle East, and are radicalized online by ISIS. This is very dangerous. The craziest part of all of this is that the European left is siding, the very open to everything European left and American left is siding with people who are incredibly particularistic and jihadi. And the only thing they really agree on, the only time you'll ever see a radical keffiyeh wearing Muslim Islamist arm in arm with an LGBTQ body pierced, tattooed, multicolored hair left winger is over bashing Israel. It's crazy, and everyone's heard the line already. You know, queers for Palestine is like chickens for KFC or cows for McDonald's. It's crazy what is going on in the world, but it's these extremes. This is in Navi. This is in all the predictions in the Zohar and the Kabbalistic thinkers like Moshe Cordovero, who said the nations of the world will unite to try and stop Israel. People who are diametrically opposed will come together. The horseshoe theory. You put Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson on one side and the extreme left on the other, and you put the Squad and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They meet in the back on one issue. They can't stand each other, but when it comes to Israel, boy, we're stuck in the middle of that horseshoe. But what's really at stake is really the future. I'm not talking about on a messianic level. when we zoom in on Iran, which is something no one wants to talk about, just like no one wants to mention the elephant in the room talking about Islam. When we zoom in on Iran, 12 are Shiites. Remember, Islam split in the 7th century to the Shiite Sunni split over who has the right to succeed Muhammad, the prophet, the leader. And Shiites believe that it has to be a direct descendant of Muhammad. The differences between these two faiths are not huge, but like we see in many parts of the world, the teeny differences make for huge divides. You even see this, unfortunately, in the Jewish world, especially the Orthodox Jewish world, with different groups of Hasidim. Thankfully, no, none of the violence. But these two groups hate each other. And Sunni are 80 to 85% of the Muslim world, by the way. Shiites are the biggest Shiite power is, of course, Iran, but there are other countries. There's Qatar, there's Shiites in Lebanon, there's Shiites in Iraq, a lot of them. But you see, even those, even with what happened with Israel on October 7th, Hamas is Sunni. ISIS hates Shiites, but Hamas is Sunni, but they aligned with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and these are all proxies of what is Iran. And the Shiite Twelvers, when I say Twelvers, they believe there's a certain number of imams of righteous descendants, and the last guy, imam, he's in like hiding. He's sequestered away, and he will appear messianically at the end as the Mahdi, the savior, to bring the whole world to this paradise based on living under Islamic law. It's all borrowed from the Jewish messianic conception. So it's very eschatological, as we say. It's very focused on the end of days. It's very dangerous. It's very at odds with Sunni Islam, but people like Hamas, who are Sunnis, because they hate us so much and they hate Israel so much, this will make like an unholy alliance. My enemy's enemy is my friend. So these people, but when we focus in on Iran, and they took charge in 1979, for those of us who can remember that, when the Shah of Iran fled, and he died in exile. His son is still living in New York. Reza Shah Pahlavi was the Shah then. And they've taken over under Ayatollah Khomeini, not to be confused with Khamenei. I think they do that just to confuse us, who's been leading the country since the 80s. These people, when you take this Islamic worldview and politicize it in this expansionist conquest to bring the infidel under the rule of Islam and under the rule of Islamic law, and make all these people dhimmi, which is these second-class people, monotheists. Everyone should Google the term dhimmi. And you combine that with their apocalyptic end of days worldview. What's at stake is something incredibly dangerous. People are jumping on Donald Trump because there's people who would, no matter if Trump were to say the world is round, there's people who would, like on the political left, would argue with it. That's how ridiculous it's gotten. Like I said, there's no center, but people are saying, they pose no threat to America. Israel dragged America into the war. Donald Trump doesn't get dragged into anything by anyone. But he sees what more people need to see, and we need to be telling people that these people, they're not a superpower, Iran, but they're incredibly dangerous, precisely because they combine an expansionist, imperialistic spiritual worldview with an apocalyptic end of days scenario that is very, very dangerous. When I remember during the Cold War, for those of us who are old enough to remember the Cold War, we had a thing called MAD, mutually assured destruction, because the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact had lots of nuclear weapons, and America and European powers had nuclear weapons. And if it got out of control, the whole world would be nuked. There'd be nothing left after these nuclear tests in the Bikini Islands. All that was left alive were like rats and cockroaches, and everything else was gone from the world. And not only that, when you were fighting godless communists who don't believe there's anything besides this world because they're atheists, they're not going to be so quick to push that button. So we had all these conflicts. We had these conflicts that were proxy wars going on with Korea and Vietnam and the Arab-Israeli conflicts after 1967, the Cuban Missile Crisis, because these two superpowers could never fight each other directly. The end would be apocalyptic for humanity. But when you have people who believe that they're doing the will of Allah, I mean, we saw already not long ago that they killed estimated 32,000 of their own people. I mean, 3,200, excuse me. How much the number? It's a lot. 32. Thousands of their own people. I just got the number confused. Sorry?
No, it is. It's 30 to 40,000.
32,000. Yeah, it was 32,000 of their own people. Yeah, my brain just went for a second. That's insane. Guterres, who runs the UN, didn't tweet anything about that, by the way. It's shocking how all the left, which is screaming about Israel behaves in war with more humanity and more care to, again, which costs us a lot more in terms of lives and money than any country in the world, that everyone goes nuts. That's the double standard that I don't want to talk about now. But this is a people, if you're willing to kill that many of your own people because you think you're doing the will of God and your own people are heretics, imagine what they would do if they got a nuclear weapon. They would use it immediately. First of all, in Israel, they would use it without thinking twice. Bibi Netanyahu, who's also always accused of, he's doing this war to divert attention from his criminal trials, which are, by the way, ridiculous in my opinion. But one thing he never compromises on, including when Obama was president, against his will and spoke in Congress, he never compromises on the security and survival of the Jewish people. If there's one thing we have learned in the last 2,000 years, and certainly in the last 100 years, is when people say they want to kill us, they generally tend to mean it. And if we don't take them seriously, it could have fatal consequences. So despite the fact that, in that 12-day war months ago, they dropped the bunker buster bombs on Fordow, they just buried the stuff underneath. Iran, these people will never, ever, ever stop. And the big mistake we make in the West, because Westerners are no longer really that idealistic anymore, people are just into comfort, is we don't want to take them seriously. It's another mistake we make. We don't take dictators who are ideologically motivated seriously. These are the people we should take the most serious. Because first of all, they're not elected. So they don't care what you think. So they will stick to their ideology. And if you don't like it, they'll kill you. I can show you journalists in the 1920s when Hitler first appears on the stage after he writes Mein Kampf in 1925 saying the guy's a clown. And that clown was incredibly consistent ideologically and had a very clear agenda. And that cost the world 50 million deaths and 6 million Jews. That's crazy. The Ayatollahs, they say the quiet part out loud. If you watch the rallies in Tehran, they're screaming death to America and death to Israel. And even though we have no border with Iran, we have no quarrel with Iran, we've never done anything to Iran. They've done some stuff to us thousands of years ago in Persia, and we had the Purim story. They view Israel and America as their biggest allies. And it's not, unlike what the left is saying, Israel's dragging a member of Trump's cabinet just resigned, claiming apparently he's under FBI investigation. He was trying to get ahead of that one. But that, Israel drags America into war for its own strategic needs. There's not an accident that they're screaming death to America and death to Israel, because we have to pull back and go back to what I started with the world dividing. Israel is the source. When I say Israel, I say the Jewish people, the Bible. Israel is the source of Western liberal democracy. I have whole presentations on the basic values. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence of the first democratic republic in human history, the United States in 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. The first book I wrote, WorldPerfect, is all about the transformative impact of one God and one absolute morality on humanity. As the Russian writer Dostoevsky said, where there is no God, everything is permissible. The violence and inhumanity and callousness of the ancient world has been mitigated so tremendously by the ideas that Judaism is directly or indirectly, through the Bible, through the Christianity that has adopted the Bible, which is the biggest selling book of all time. It has transformed the world and created a system of government called liberal democracy, which is not, by the way, the Jewish ideal. The Jewish ideal is biblical government, king, Sanhedrin, high priest, halacha. But as Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for every other system we tried from time to time throughout history. So perfect it ain't, but it's a heck of a lot better than anything else. It has raised more people out of poverty, created more opportunity, more wealth, more equality, improved human life far more than anything else. But democracy, as they say, freedom is not free. Democracy has been spreading dramatically, but it comes up against a lot of resistance. And the values that come from that, that are the foundational values, it's right there in the doors of the Supreme Court of the United States, are the tablets of the Ten Commandments. It's the frieze in the center of the Supreme Court building in Washington, is Moses holding the luchot. So people talk about separation of church and state in America. I'm sorry, the founding fathers didn't mean there's no faith in America. They meant that there's freedom of conscience. Worship God as you please. There's no state religion, which has proven to be great for the world. But when enemies are attacking Israel, and think about what's been created in the last few years, especially under Donald Trump, who's so strong, is a coalition of countries that have nothing in common. Russia, Korea, Iran, Venezuela, thank God out of the picture, Cuba, hopefully out soon, hopefully, you know, all these countries really have in common when you stand back and look is we hate this worldview, this freedom, this democracy, and America being the one great superpower in the world, which spends more on defense than the next 10 countries in the world combined, $2 trillion, like more than China, Russia, and everyone else combined, is the only country that can stop the expansion ideologically and more importantly, physically and militarily of these ideas from various places. China has its agenda. Russia has its agenda. Ukraine, China has the South Pacific and its Belt and Road Initiative. Iran has taken over the Middle East and hopefully the whole world. But they realize that what's at stake is we got to remove the mega superpower America or put in place weak political leaders. The past president of the United States was not even, in my opinion, mentally functioning, and that is very dangerous. And the superpower, Israel really is, by the way, one of the biggest militaries in the world for a teeny tiny country when it mobilizes. It has the best air force in the world, incredible technology. It's funny because Israel was locked out of the Paris Air Show by the Euro leftist government. And I saw a funny meme. It said, we're sorry we can't attend the Paris Air Show, but if you want to watch us, if you want to see our equipment demonstrated live, turn on your television. But Israel is the ally of the United States. America has no greater ally than Israel in the world. It is what is keeping the Middle East from falling apart, from the sectarian Shiite Sunni violence ripping the Middle East apart. Israel has saved countries like Jordan. They wouldn't exist today without it. So these totalitarian regimes recognize Iran specifically. For our ideology, the existence of a Jewish state is a contradiction to Islam, the Jewish Islamic worldview. But they're the ones blocking us from really taking over everyone, because no one in the Middle East could stop their expansion once they take off. Their ring of fire they created, which thank God fell apart with the fall of Syria and the fall of Hezbollah and what's happened with Hamas. But they recognize that that's the first stepping stone in taking over the world, really. So to have people framing this as America's doing Israel a favor is ridiculous. First, it's a tremendous alliance, the sharing of technology and the support. Now, the fact that American and Iranian pilots are flying side by side it's unbelievable. It is apocalyptic in a biblical sense. But this is the craziest part of all of this. Just like we have the LGBTQ, leftist arm in arm with the radical Shiite, is you have a lot of countries in the world, and even parts, and a good chunk of the United States, especially on the political left, going against Israel. It's unjustified what Israel did in Gaza, even though it's the most unambiguous conflict I've seen since the Holocaust. These genocidal Hamas subhuman slime slaughtering people. It's in their charter to commit genocide against the Jewish people, yet we're not going to talk about that. So what you have now is parts of the right and the left, for different reasons, but primarily it's more on the left and the right, but attacking the alliance, saying that it's Trump is being pushed into things by Bibi, which is a ridiculous accusation, or it's not in America's best interest to do this. It's absolutely crazy. They're shooting themselves in the foot. It would be kind of like, during the Cold War, the end of World War II, America bombing the Soviet army as it's closing in from the east on Germany. We're allies in the same struggle, but because, as the Mishnah and Sota said, truth will be absent, people just don't have clarity anymore. And they're getting their understanding the world from TikTok videos and X, and everything is unfiltered and nothing is moderated and people have no clarity, and it's a crazy, crazy world, and we have to be standing up for the truth, making it clear what's at stake. This is really a struggle for the future of humanity, and America and Israel are allies in the same struggle. Israel is the front line of the struggle. America is back there making it all happen, supporting it, and the block against tyrannical, expansionism in the world. But Israel is the source and America is the symbol. And we can't say that enough. The Christian right gets that. A lot of the right in America gets that. Some people in Europe get it, but that is really what's at stake. And I've been talking and talking and talking. So I don't know if Naomi you wanted to ask anything. So
I do want to ask you a few questions. First of all, so everything you spoke about, what I'd like to ask you is what would happen? Like, what is at stake if we cannot bring down the Iranian regime? What is at stake if there? Because from what I understand, I was listening to a podcast from Michael Oren the other day, not Michael Coren, with Yishai Fleischer, and he said something so amazing. So the problem with these people is that, like you said, they have no respect for human life, right? For them, they die for their cause. They're 72 virgins. He said, when you knock one off, the next one comes up. Like they all have this fervor of dying and their whole ideology. So you knock one off, the next one comes up. He says he basically put it that we would be looking at something like the Cold War, like we would have to just constantly keep them down. Like every time they would build something, we'd have to go in there, but to destroy them is impossible. What is your view on that?
I mean, first of all, it's not 72 virgins, it's one 72-year-old virgin. I have to correct that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I can't resist that one. But it's right. These are people who will never give up. When you are that ideologically and religiously motivated, they would slaughter their whole population. The core of what keeps them in power is the RGC. This elite like subunit. It's not the Iranian army, which I think could turn. But as Trump says, we'll accept nothing now but surrender. They're never going to surrender. The only hope is we don't want American boots on the ground. I don't think it's going to happen, with the possibility of a U.S. seizing Karg Island, which is this island 15 miles off the coast of Iran, where the oil goes through. But that we had a hope for, and this is what Israel is working on. People have been watching online. Israel is using little drones to literally target two Basij, who are their little brown shirt police who kill people and shoot people on the street, standing by at a checkpoint. I've seen the videos. They're standing there checking out cars, and suddenly they both blow up. They're trying to weaken the military, of course, but the repression infrastructure to the point where the people have to rise up. Regime change is the only hope for these people. They will never give up. If, God forbid, this conflict ends and the regime is still in power, albeit it's like a dog with three broken legs, and damaged spine, but it's still around, it will recover. And it will come back with a vengeance now, with more than before, as soon as it can. And it will. There's no question. It'll be motivated by what motivated it previously, which is this apocalyptic 12-verse Shiite worldview, combined with this desire for revenge. And who knows who will be in place in America at the time. So, the cow's out of the barn. And it cannot be stopped. And if people had any sense in Europe, they would recognize this is a fight to the finish. The fact that NATO allies are standing there saying, we're not going to do anything, is personally it's disgusting, in my opinion. And it's incredibly stupid and suicidal. So everything is at stake. And on a spiritual level, in my mind, this is why I figure Donald Trump is such a larger than life character. It's so wild in U.S. history to have someone like this running the superpower. I was saying before the last election, if Kamala Harris gets elected, to go back to the pregnancy analogy, God is basically inducing the pregnancy. Everything's going to fall apart. It's going to be unbelievable because she was so not competent to be in that position. And if Donald Trump gets in there, he's going to buy us more time because look at the government is so pro-Israel. People like Huckabee and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. I mean, this is like the dream team for Israel. It is. It's unbelievable. Now the danger is we can't fall asleep again. Jews in America thinking, oh, it's great. They'll come down and no, it'll be a contraction. And the problem is that means there'll be another contraction. Again, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a prophet, but it's very clear that these people will never give up. And if they are not stopped now, maybe there'll be a couple of years when they're recovering and licking their wounds, but they will come back with a vengeance, smarter, having learned their lessons, and they will definitely try and go nuclear. There's not a doubt in my mind. Why are you getting uranium to 60% when you need like 3 or 4% for a reactor? They must be stopped. Evil must be destroyed. As Edmund Burke, who was an Irish parliamentarian who spoke in the British Parliament in the 18th century during the American Civil War, he had one of the most classic lines. He said, "All it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." And to stand back and wait and think, Gamze Yavur, this too will pass. Evil doesn't pass. Evil has to be destroyed. And humanity hasn't learned that lesson yet. So this is a fight to the finish. And let's hope that we can get it finished quickly and that, we don't pull out like we can't just drop a few bombs on Fordo and think that's over. No, it's not.
So that's what I want to ask you. Would you say from a spiritual perspective that the possibility that this wouldn't be finished is the possibility that this would hold back the redemption process that Hashem is saying we're not ready yet? Like, we're looking at this and we know that if Iran is overthrown, the regime in Iran is overthrown, we know that will literally destroy a lot of evil in the world because of their proxies, Hamas, right? All these different countries. I also was listening to a podcast and he mentioned that China is working to really become one of the greats in terms of militarily. And they're not yet there, but they're almost there. And they were about to supply Iran with certain anti-aircraft missiles that would have literally been, what we're seeing now is nothing compared to what they would have been able to do. So you have that aspect of it, right? You have Russia, who's been involved in this Ukrainian war, but once that ends, Russia is going to And so my question to you is, do you believe from a spiritual perspective that is God's way of telling us that he is pulling back on the possibility of the, how quickly we're going through the redemptive process, that we're not zoche yet? Is it a wake-up call to us to say, God is saying, listen, you can't be complacent. You got to daven, you got to give tzedakah, you got to do mitzvahs, you got to speak up, you got to do whatever you can. You cannot live the same existence that you lived 5 years ago because it's not the same world. And would you be in agreement with that?
I would. Just before I answer that question directly, what you're talking about China, et cetera, is 100%. It's not just Iran. You have this alliance, this access of these countries. Some are very powerful, like China, which is really making a play to be the major power in the world. And they're expanding their military very rapidly. It's not up to the US's at all, especially their Navy, but they're definitely making a play. And a weak America means not just Iran, but it means all of these. When Trump said that Putin would have invaded Ukraine if I had been president, I believe that's the case. Nature abhors a vacuum, like Aristotle says. When there's no power standing up and confronting it, that's the problem with democracy. Democracy is government of the people. So no democracy's ever gone to war with another democracy. That's a fact. But it's very hard to get democracy to go to war. Had not the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, there was a big pro-Nazi movement in America and a lot of, isolationism going on, like you see with people like Tucker Carlson today. So that's the problem. So the dangers that are unleashed by not finishing this job is not only leaving apocalyptic Iran in power, but it's, again, who comes after Donald Trump? If a Democratic president on the other side who's not into doing this stuff comes in power, you're going to see a massive expansion of all of these different proxy countries and their proxies around the world moving to overwhelm on every level, militarily, demographically, ideologically, the free world. So this is really huge. A strong America pouncing on, you could be sure China will go after Taiwan almost immediately. When people see that America means business and is not afraid to flex its massive military might, they're going to think really twice about doing anything else. But to go back to what the question you're asking is, yeah, 100%. We know that all of human history is an interplay between Ratzon Hashem, God's will. I mean, He's all powerful, all knowing, and and human free will. That's on a micro level in our individual lives, and it's on a macro level. We do get to redemption, but how quickly, how slowly, how painfully, how painlessly, that is up to us. The fact that we are now, 5,786 years, and we got, like most the Jewish sources say, like 6,000 years till we have to be at the Messianic era, not till Mashiach comes. That's 214 years. We're already, as the latest, we're going to be in what's called the world to come, shows us that we, the Jewish people, have done a lot of stupid things. We haven't listened. We've gone the hardest routes. We've suffered a lot because of it. We've been exiled for thousands of years. We've lost a lot of our family to crusades and pogroms and holocausts and horrible things like that. But we will get there. Yeshayahu, the famous quote that everyone likes to focus in on is he says, Achishena be'ito, I will hasten it in its time, which is a contradiction. If it's in its time, hasten it, and the rabbis jump in and say, and this is how I understand it. First of all, if we do the right thing, that famous expression of all the Jews were to keep 2 Shabbatot, 2 Sabbaths, we'd be there, we'd have redemption. We could come together instead of fighting amongst ourselves and splitting and watching 90, 70, like in America, 70% of the Jewish marriages are intermarriages, watching us commit spiritual, basically suicide, and watching us fight amongst each other. Or we could come together, be proactive as a people towards our fellow Jews who are not connected, and come together and recognize that our enemies don't care what kind of Jew we are. In Auschwitz, there was only one line. There wasn't one for Ashkenazim or Sephardim, Haredim and Dati Lumi, religious, secular, reform. It's crazy stuff. And we could bring it immediately, or we could schlep it out. And I understand that there's also another scenario in there. It's so bad, God could say, I can't stand to watch this anymore, so I'm going to just bring it on hard. I will hasten it, because we know there's no atheists in the foxholes. We saw on October 7th, we see in Jewish history that when we argue, on October 7th, for those of us who were living there, and Israel was ripping itself apart. What was going on in the country was crazy, with the Supreme Court and the secular breaking up public prayer ceremonies held in Tel Aviv on Yom Kippur. And it was, I saw this coming. I'm a historian. Whenever we start fight amongst ourselves, it's God as if He's saying, my children, I can't stand to watch you killing each other. It's not literally, it's figuratively. I'm going to let non-Jews do it, because when they start doing that, then we wake up. It's the book of Judges. There was no king in Israel, and everyone did that which was right in their eyes. And He sent Ammon, He sent Canaan, He sent Sisera, and He sent this to oppress us. And the Jewish people cried out. And then a judge arose, and we united behind that judge. We fought off our enemies, but then we slacked off. So it could be a hastening. It means we just get it right, and God says, okay, you crossed the finish line. Or it could mean, enough of this already. I can't stand to watch more Jews assimilating, more infighting. I want the world to live with connection to me, which is the purpose of creation. The highest level of pleasure is relationship with God. Why aren't you bringing this to humanity yet? Why, you, Orthodox Jewish world, are you being so reactive and so insular? You got to be more proactive and take responsibility. You're the ones who know. It's a big wake-up call for the religious Jewish world. So I'm just going to end it now. That could be. Or we'll schlep it out. We'll go through more, God forbid, difficult, dangerous situations. I don't know what will be. But what's clear, the takeaway from this is that it's in our hands. We have to act on 2 levels here. Geopolitically, we're not supposed to rely on miracles, like I said at the beginning. We have to be making the case for Israel, educating our friends and family, speaking up in the media, giving people clarity about what's at stake. But we have to recognize that that is just a symptom. The cause of all anti-Semitism, and Iran is just another example of it, is We have been trying to move the world since Avram Avinu towards a vision of values based on one God and one absolute standard of morality. And anti-Semitism, regardless of what excuse it hides behind, whether it's secular communists, pagan Nazis, or radical jihadi Muslims, people say, I understand the pagans and the atheists, but what's with they're doing it in God's name? No, they don't have, unlike Christianity, which has in their Bible, our Bible. And the evangelical pro-Israel Christians get it when God says to Abraham, Avarcha mivarchecha, I'll bless those who bless you. And they see the miracle, the rebirth of Israel. They see God's hand, which is why they're lining up behind us. These guys, go read Jonathan Sacks's, the late great blessed memory book, Not in God's Name. There are people who do things in God's name that are very, very evil. But one way or another, it's pushback against the national historic mission of the Jewish people to bring one God and one source of morality into the world. That's what Am HaNivchar, chosen people, means. That's the end of the book of Isaiah. And the mountain of the Lord's house will be established upon the mountains and it'll be exalted above the hills. And all the nations will say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. Shoot.
I can't hear you. Okay,
I
there.
just got cut off. Sorry. Wait a second. I got to get back here. Hello, one second. Let me tell this person not to call me.
No, we see you. We see you.
Okay, one second. I just want to tell him. 1 second. I just want to call him back in and be disconnected. Okay, there you go. Unfortunately my WhatsApp is on my computer, so it came in. I lost you. I don't see you anymore, but you can see me. That's good. Okay. I just lost the train of thought pulled out without me on it. Yeah. So Isaiah is saying, that he's saying from out of Zion will come forth, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. That is the messianic vision that we want for the world. That's what we have to have. So, and until, let me see there, I think I can get you back there again. There we are. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so that is.
Would you say,
yeah.
Would you say that the very, very fact that the world doesn't have this understanding and this messianic view, and that is what you're claiming is our role, would you then say that we are failing at the role of what the purpose of the Jewish world was supposed to bring to the rest of the world? Are you saying that we are failing at that purpose?
So first of all, I'm not supposed to teach the world the messianic view per se. We're not proselytizing and evangelizing.
No, but I'm saying to bring the world to goodness.
Yes. But yes, I would say this is the soapbox that I am always on. And it's a heavy message. Those of us who know that are connected, who are knowledgeable, have an obligation to be Avraham and not Noah. Noah was a righteous man in his time. I understand there's a big debate. That's what Rashi asks about whether would he have been more righteous in Abraham's time. But in my opinion, Noah was on his life raft that he spent 100 years building. But he wasn't. I would open up some outreach organizations. Repent, ye sinners, the end is near. We got to connect to God. The world was full of Hamas, violence. Excuse me. The Orthodox Jewish world, and it's a whole big conversation that maybe we'll have at a different point, has been so pulverized by physical and spiritual threats that it has become extremely reactionary and very comfortable and reactionary. Meaning the big thing is most of the stringencies kept in the religious world today are been between us and God. The standards of kashrut, the strictness of Shabbos observance, the standards of dress, what we won't watch, what we won't read, what we won't listen to, what we won't eat, where we won't go. I'm not denigrating that. We have to be balanced as Jews. We have to be twice as careful what comes out of our mouth as what comes in our mouth. When we recognize that Torah and mitzvot are the lifeblood and the guidance system of the Jewish people, without which there is no Jewish people and there is no world, but they're a means to an end, and the end and the job of the Jewish people is Kiddush Hashem. I say this everywhere all the time. It's to live and act in a way that inspires people, because when you get it right, people will follow you. It's not to convert, not to conquer like they're doing. If you have the right mechanism, the world will come about and they'll all become Noahides and they'll say, let's see how you do it. We want to follow your lead. Like I said, if we don't fill the world with those values, like Aristotle said, nature abhors a vacuum, the world will be full of the opposite values. Those are evil and they'll come after us first. Rav Chaim of Volozhin in the early 19th century, he had a great line. It's the single best one-sentence explanation of all of anti-Semitism. When Jews don't make Kiddush, Gentiles make Havdalah. That is, everyone should have that on the refrigerator, to be aware on a personal level that I represent the Jewish people. If you're a guy wearing a kippah, it's really obvious. Everything I do, a little thing, has an ability to be a mensch-like thing to do and be a Kiddush Hashem or be a Chillul Hashem. And if all of us do the little things proactively and reach out, not coercively, Jews are never coerced. You push a Jew, they push back. But you look in Israel today, and you see, I've lived in Israel for decades and decades, and you see what happens since October 7th. From the bottom up, there's this massive grassroots movement. Look at these army units going into battle, and they're saying Hallel and Tehillim and making brachot, and the soldiers have their hands on the soldier next to them. What aren't you seeing from the most religious part of Israeli society anywhere near the openness and proactivity that we need to see to welcome them in? I personally hold that if the Orthodox Jewish world, especially the very Orthodox Jewish world, the Haredi world in Israel, would open its hearts up and feel it as part of the country and take bigger responsibility, you would have I think that would do it right there. Mashiach's coming, that's it. Massive wave of return. And Jews living in the Galut, in the diaspora, if they would recognize we have to do a full court press on loving our fellow Jews, welcoming them in, stop being afraid. The best defense is a good offense. Defensive positions in military history have never worked. Ask the French about the Maginot Line. If we don't proactively fill that world individually and collectively with living and acting in a way that's a higher level, not by judging them, not by pushing them, not by coercing them, not by conquering them, then we're just going to get stuck here. Rabbi Weinberg, my Rosh Hashiva, blessed memory, the founder of Eshet Torah, he had a very heavy piece of Talmud. It's from Tractate Shabbat that he used to always quote. And he's one of the driving forces behind the whole Baal Tshuva movement. When he started this in the 50s, when he was a young man, everyone was just trying to keep Jews in because we were literally hemorrhaging Jews to assimilation in America and places like that. And the piece of Talmud is very interesting. It's God says to the angels before the destruction of the temple, go put marks on the heads of the righteous people because I want to save them. And the accusing angel says, like, what do you mean? They're the ones, because they knew better. They're the ones who had the obligation to get the other Jews to come back and do the right thing. And God says, I'm paraphrasing, I'm God. I know they wouldn't have listened. And this accusing angel says, but they didn't try. And God says, you're right. Go put marks on their heads. I'm going to kill them first. That is super heavy. Those of us who know are responsible. We have to be proactive. We have to be proactive in dealing with the media, in dealing with politics, in supporting our political candidates and politicians who are supporting Israel and get it clearly. We have to be more, but more importantly, because that's just a symptom, we have to be proactive in terms of connecting first and foremost, like tzedakah. You always take care of your family first. We have to be proactively looking. All of us can do little things, whether it's just smiling, inviting someone for Shabbat, anything we can do. My wife works for an organization called Project Inspire, which is an offshoot, which is just about like getting religious Jews to interact with non-religious. They want it. They want it. Why is Chabad so successful at what they do? They have a great business model, but they're the one group of very religious looking Jews who's completely non-judgmental and welcoming. I deal with so many people who are involved in Chabad who are not religious, but they love it. He's the religious guy who just like is going to love me and invite me for Shabbat wherever I am in the world. They're going to give me kosher food and some really good alcohol when I come for a meal. My friends, all it takes is to do that. We have to wake up. All of this is designed to make us uncomfortable, to recognize that we're near the end. That God is shutting down the exile, by the way. America is not going to be anywhere else to go after. And I always say the last place in America is Florida, which is why it's shaped like a pier. We'll all go down. Anyone stuck in America will go down to Miami Beach and Key West, and the boats will come and rescue. I always say it's better to get to Israel, not as a refugee. It's better to go there, now. I always jokingly say you should get a place. The real estate's going crazy, and the French already got all the good apartments in Netanya. So we have to recognize it's scary, but it's great. If we stand back and open our eyes up and put the proper hashkafic software in our heads, we can see, as a lot of the other people I'm sure have spoken on this podcast have said, that the wheels are turning, the end is approaching, but we're not supposed to, even though Odele, I'm going to wait for him. We should be, even though he's coming late, the Mashiach, I'm going to do whatever I can with whatever resource, talents, and abilities I have to hasten that process. And then God will look down on us and say, you reached that threshold. I'm going to end it now quickly and painlessly. And we should get to that soon. We really need to get there.
Wow, this is unbelievable. You need to speak everywhere. I'm telling you, Rabbi, you need to speak to the Jewish world. You need to get out there and speak to the Jewish world, because there is a disconnect. There is a disconnect, because you know what it is? It's having to think differently. It's having to relearn everything. It's having to go out of your comfort zone of what you think you know and who you are and the way you're living, and saying, wait a second, I need to question everything, because what does God want from me? Not what I think, not culturally what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm gonna let this person ask something, but I just want to ask another question. In terms of the way we're going, right? The scenarios look a little bit scary, really, really scary, because we are not in the same world that we were before, and the entire Democratic Party has moved so radically left, and their banner is being anti-Israel. That is their clicks. That is their banner today. Right. We do know that there is a great possibility the next president of the United States will be a radical leftist, a guy like Mamdani, whose wife is outwardly, and him too. It's unbelievable that this guy actually, it just shows you where everybody's sitting, that it's almost the combined hate of everybody, which blinded them to the reality of what their suicide really is. Would you say, like, there's two questions here. Number one, would you say that the Democrats, as we know it, want to destroy democracy, the understanding of democracy of what we know in America or the West, in Europe? Because it makes no sense. Why would European leaders, why would people who have children, right, Rabbi? They have children, they have grandchildren and children. They know the future of the world. Why would they impose this? What is the aim? Why would they impose this? That's number one. And number two, I want to ask you a second question in terms of what you spoke about in Israel. What is it that the rabbis, who are supposed to be our tzaddikim, why are they blinded to this idea? What is it? Is it fear? Why is there not more clarity? Where is the truth lying within this area? Why are we confused about the truth? Why can't we see all these things?
Okay, so it's turning into a long interview here. But there are two huge questions there. First of all, I don't believe the entire Democratic Party wants to destroy the United States. I believe that, like I said, extremes pull. So the squad, Rashida Tlaib and Ilan Omar and these
It was
people
Newsom.
at
Just came out.
AOC. Sorry?
Newsom. Who was it?
Yeah, I'm saying Newsom is actually he's there's more extreme than he is. He's kind of in the middle balancing, because he feels to get what gets people's attention and gets the young vote is the more extreme you are. So they're taking positions that are really, like, take the position on not on voter ID in America. Like 85% of Americans, including the majority of the Democratic Party, want some sort of voter ID in elections. You can't just show up and sign, this is me. Yet they're taking this, transing the kids. This is an 80-20 issue. But I just like, they feel like people like Schumer, you've watched him shift from being 10 years ago super pro voter ID to now saying it's Jim Crow, part two. Like Jim Crow, the laws in the South that oppressed blacks to keep them from voting. That's a ridiculous statement. So the extremes are what gets the likes, and extremes are what gets the votes and the clicks. And the middle is gone. John Locke, the founder of liberalism, will be horrified by what's called liberalism today. That's number one. And just added one more point. Will Hilberg, who was an American Jewish sociologist from the mid-20th century, came up with this beautiful idea called cut flower ethics. He said cut flowers in a vase look really nice, but after a week, because they're cut off from their roots, they wither and die. So too with the values that make up our Western liberal democracy. Without the God-given roots from which they are nurtured, connection with God, absolute values, the Bible, they cannot sustain themselves. Fast forward 70 years later, and boy, did he nail it. Democracy, to a large, these values about freedom and stuff has metastasized. I'm using that term deliberately into something that feels and looks sort of like it was, but isn't. Combine that with the crazy narrative that's being foisted on the world of there's only two kinds of people in this world. There's victimizers and victims. There's oppressed and oppressors. If you're successful or powerful or white and a male especially, you got to be guilty of something. It's a completely skewed, warped view of reality. Europe is so guilt-ridden and so lost its own identity nationally and religiously. You put that together, it's a toxic, like cocktail for suicide ideologically, unless you believe, like Israel Mayer Lau said. He said, he had a great line. He was one of the youngest survivor of Buchenwald, former chief rabbi of Israel, now the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. He had a great line. He said, "A nation that doesn't value its past has no right to dream about its future." And you can see that when you start the 1619 project before, which is this whole thing foisted. America was great until the Pilgrims showed up, which is 1620 in Plymouth Rock, that kind of stuff. Let's rip out the roots of where we come from. America is not perfect. No country is perfect. Everyone did slavery in this world. Everyone oppressed and conquered. America did a lot less than anyone else. It's the most successful superpower without an empire in human history. But when you just poison your identity through collective guilt, and you have no other values to anchor it with, which is like Judeo-Christian values and truth and reality and the ability to be objective and not be so. Like I said, it's gotten to the point where whatever Donald Trump says is wrong and evil. It's impossible to function that way. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a world where you don't have real leadership. You don't have the center anymore. Now, to go to the second question you asked, which I got to be careful what I say now, you asked about rabbinic leadership. I have people telling me, you think that these rabbis who are living in the world of Torah 100%, which they absolutely are in any way skewed in their worldview by outside in opinions and what's going on? I'm saying, look, I don't want to be very careful. I'm not denigrating any Gedolim, but there's no question. Only God is perfectly impartial and perfect human, perfect being, Anyone who thinks that even the biggest rabbis around, some of whom, by the way, are extremely old, you're not hearing things directly from their mouths. You're being fed quotes that are supposedly coming out of them, and they're being filtered information that goes into them. So often what they're saying is not necessarily based on a clear understanding of what's really going on, because they're not sitting there watching online the news and understanding what's really going on. This is true. Most of the Gedolei Israel are quite old, quite aged people. But if you also think that, I'm sorry, I'm going to be accused of heresy by someone. If you think that these rabbis are not in any way influenced by what they were raised with, the community they lived in, and the people to come out and say things that are really transformatively different. I don't hear any of the Rosh Yeshivot in America saying this, like any of what I'm saying. Not that I'm such a great genius. I am not. And certainly I'm not anywhere near the level of Torah knowledge that they have. But I'm telling you, there's too much stasis in the Jewish world. There's too much of that mind view that I talked about before of preservation. Preservation, keep out. It's defensive. There's too much defensive stuff. I still running in the collective consciousness of the Jewish world, and I believe in the collective consciousness of our Torah leadership. And I know, who am I to critique that? I'm sorry. I'm a human being. I'm a Jew. I have some understanding of Hashkafa, and to me, it's a lot of clarity. And Aryeh Kaplan had a great line. The late great Aryeh Kaplan. He said, "One cannot live a truth while allowing others to remain ignorant of it." To me, the lack of proactive Kiddush Hashem, the hyper-defensive nature of the Jewish world, and combined with too much comfort, living in diaspora in wonderful suburbs that Jews have never had this level of comfort before, creates a stasis, a static situation, which is untenable for a God who wants to push the story forward. And without people like Rav Noach Weinberg, who said, I'm going to start doing Kiruv. And look at how much. There's so many thousands of religious Jews today because of people who've been influenced by Rav Noach and his programs and his Talmidim. this is what the world needs more of. And if it's not going to come, Naomi, from the top down, and I don't see it coming there, it's got to come from the bottom up. We have to be the change we want to see. That doesn't mean going against what people are saying, against what they call das Torah, which is another interesting discussion, because one person's truth is not another's, one person's gadol is not another's. It's amazing how, like the Lithuanian yeshiva world, my gedolim, yolni gedolim, what they say is das Torah. The entire Gemara is people putting opinions in that are valid. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, but every one of us has an obligation to get clear on our own hashkafa, to understand the ABCs of Judaism, which many Jews who are raised religious never were taught. I just keep kosher and Shabbat because my parents did. We have to work out what's the purpose of creation? What's the Jewish people's role in the story? What is my responsibility as part of that people? We are the God Squad. That is our job. To say otherwise, I'm sorry, I don't care how great someone thinks you are, is a lack of clarity. We have to preserve our identity. We have to look out for ourselves, but we have to recognize that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh, we're responsible for each other. Our fellow Jews who are intermarrying at that tremendous rate, we are responsible for it. And we're responsible to start the story that Avram Avinu, finish the story that Avram Avinu began 3,700 years ago, which is get humanity back to relationship with God. The world will not leave us alone until that happens. Not Iran, not the axis of evil. And God runs the show, the good, the bad. It's all Ratzon Hashem. But it's to send someone against us who's going to wake us up to recognize that our current state of affairs is things are moving inexorably towards the end. 120 years ago, 0.5% of the Jews of the world lived in Israel. Today, it's more than 7.5 million Jews are living in Israel today. That's insane. We have a state back. Is it perfect? No. But to not see this as part of a redemptive process, you got to be crazy. To not Jerusalem reunified, the ground up tshuva movement in Israel, it's all happening. We have to wake up. We cannot go back to sleep, whether we live in Israel or live in the diaspora. That's the big message.
Would you say that diaspora Jews at this point have to wake up and start thinking about Eretz Yisrael?
100%. I say it all the time. I say, even if I understand there's reasons to stay, I got my kids in the school, the job, but that still, like I say, libi b'mizrach v'ani b'sof ma'arav. It's the opposite of where, we're in the far west, my heart's in the east. We have to, like Yehuda Halevi said, we have to not be just mouthing words about redemption and Mashiach. We say it every day. We pray, rebuilding of Jerusalem, the temple, Mashiach coming, all that stuff. We have to be doing whatever we can. Like if you're raising kids in America, you shouldn't be like, I see in Muncie, all these people, their kids just buy houses and live next to them. They're embedding themselves in Gullus. We should be raising our kids. They should learn how to speak Hebrew. Why aren't schools teaching kids how to speak functional Hebrew? It's crazy. Why aren't they indoctrinating our kids that I want you to be there and where my grandchildren go, I will follow? Why don't they recognize, even though we're the frog in the boiling water and it's getting hotter, the famous analogy of the frog on the stove in the cold water, and the water heats up slowly, and before the frog realizes it's been boiled. I'm not saying America's going to have a Holocaust, but I speak all over the United States. Everywhere I go, you got guys with AR-14s with flak jackets on. I grew up, I didn't grow up religious. I grew up Reform, but I never saw a cop outside a synagogue. You didn't need security. Anti-Semitism has gone up like 400% since October 7th. Jews are targets of 65% of all religious-based hate crime in the United States, and we're 2% of the population. We can't be sanguine about this, like sit there and wait. We have to wake up. We should be preparing ourselves, definitely. We're going home, and we should have a plan, and we should start doing stuff to make that happen. We had a bunch of events, whether it was COVID or different wars, when Israel was closed, and we couldn't get home. We're stuck there, I hate when people say in Israel, I'm stuck in Israel. No one should ever use that term. People who can't get out of there, you're not stuck in Israel. You're at home and you can't get a flight back to Gullus. But it's a dangerous thing to say, I'm stuck there. No, for thousands of years, Jews wished their whole, I could just get to the land of Israel for a visit. So we have to make a paradigm shift in our brains and not just pay lip service to these concepts, which we think some point in the future are going to happen. My friends, it is happening now before our eyes.
I'm going to let her ask you that last question. I promise I'll let you go. I just want to say one thing. You know, whenever I say, if you look at the infrastructure that we Jews have built in Chutz La'aretz, right? The unbelievable amount of the infrastructure, the schools that these people are talking about are the schools that they built. If they would come to Eretz Yisrael, they would build the same schools. What they've built there is exactly what you can build here. If there would be a huge amount of Jews coming in, you would have everything you want. You know, Central was built by the Jews. You know, all these schools, SKA and all these schools and all these huge shuls all over North America were built by the Jews, right? Same thing could be done here. And just think, if we would build it here, what we would have. It's the craziest thing. It's like we're blinded.
It's 100%. It's self-fulfilling prophecy, just to end with this thought. But, you know, in the 1900s, there's two places, the Gedolei Europa of Northern Europe, Lithuania and Poland would have said Jews are not allowed to go. One is America, the Golden Medina with the sweatshops. You have to work 7 days a week. Shabbat goes, Jewish identity goes. The other is Israel, created by secular left-wing Zionists.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, and Rev Kook, the chief rabbi of pre-state Israel, Palestine, he wrote to the Gedolei Europa and he said, before the Holocaust, send Talmidim, like the Gra sent 500 of his Talmidim in the late 18th century to in the early 19th century came to Israel. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't want people to go to these places because there's no Torah infrastructure. But by not sending people who are Gedolim, look what we have in America today. Ironically, fast forward 80 years after the Holocaust, and I'm not judging the rabbis. It's easy to be right in hindsight. But the place where all of Torah was and the vast majority of Jews were living is now the world's largest Jewish cemetery. It's called Eastern Europe. And they're buried in places like Auschwitz and Treblinka. And America and Israel have 90% of the Jews in the world. And they got the Mir Yeshiva and they got Lakewood and everything is there and kosher food and the OU. And they give like hashgacha to like 500,000 products. Imagine, it's counterfactual historical speculation. It didn't happen. But imagine what would have been had a different decision been made that we're going to send shock troops, solid, strong guys, kind of like what Chabad does, sends people to places that have nothing, but they stay there and they stay from. I think America would be a very different place. Israel would be a very different place, and redemption would have already come.
Right.
So we have to. So people say, Israel, what my kids from my places for my kids. The schooling there is complicated. I raised all my kids there. I got 5 married kids with their own kids, Baruch Hashem, living in Israel. But if we were to pour like 1 million American Jews into Israel, we could change everything, just like the Russians had a big impact. So we got to be that change. When you trickle little at a time in, a lot of people buying property, they're not moving there. We make a decision, we want to raise our families there. I was lucky. I came as a non-religious Jew at the age of 22, not planning to stay. And I stayed and I married there and I had kids there. So it was easy for me. I didn't leave anything behind. I didn't have a house and stuff. I understand the difficulty of it, but it's making a paradigm shift in our brains to start doing something concrete to move towards that because it's going to happen and it's preferable to do it comfortably rather than as a refugee in an emergency evacuation of some sort.
Okay, there's one person here who's had her hand raised and then I promise I'll let you go. Rebecca, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Rabbi Spiro, and also thank you, Nomi, for organizing this. We do have a lot of good relationships with people outside the Orthodox Community Federation. I work at another Jewish organization here in town that we interact with a lot of people, and there's 2 things I interact with, and one is more poisonous than the other. The more poisonous thing is a certain moral superiority, like you don't really support Israel, what Israel's doing in Gaza. You don't really support conservative politics. You don't really people sort of, they can't get past that. They like me, they enjoy Shabbos meals, a nice chicken soup goes a long way. But that is one of the biggest impediments I'm finding to doing this kiruv sort of, we're informal, we don't have an organization, we just invite a lot of people and celebrate with other people when we can. But that's really something that's been very tricky. Other people approach the same thing a little bit more timidly. They'll say the same words, but in a different tone. You seems like such a nice, rational person. Do you really support Israel? Is that really true? So I'm wondering, it seems like the politics is getting in the way of some of this outreach. So I'm all about continuing to reach out to people and encourage them and invite them and bring Yiddishkeit into their lives, to give them an authentic source to turn to when they have questions and really go out of my way to do that. I'm just curious what your thoughts are about this. Again, specifically the moral superiority, like, oh, you are a Trumpster, you follow this, you support Israel and genocide. So what can I just hear your comments about that?
Well, first of all, in any situation, informal or informal in Kiruv today, given that most Jews in America are on the political left and Democrats, I avoid it like the plague. I don't go into that because you're just going to win the battle maybe, but lose the war. And if the goal is to bring someone close to Torah, by the way, you see that when a person buys into Torah values, they generally will move towards a more center or even right-wing position because while God is not a Republican or a Democrat, the moral agenda and worldview of the right is definitely closer to Torah values. That's number one. Number two, in dealing with Israel, you have to be informed enough to be able to explain people that they drank the Kool-Aid about what Israel does. You have to have to show what Israel does. I'd be happy to share with Naomi some people like John Stewart, who's a major in the reserves in U.S. Army and a professor at West Point. I met him in an airplane. I flew back with him once, and he like Richard Kemp, who used to be the former NATO commander in Bosnia for the British Army in the 1990s. They're the experts in this stuff, and he goes on to explain how Israel does more to minimize civilian casualties than any army in human history. So you need to have that on your fingertips, but you also have to be aware that sometimes, to quote the great rabbis Simon and Garfunkel in the song "The Boxer," a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. You always, when you're dealing with a Kiruv situation, need to hear: is this person actually listening to me, or are they on a soapbox? Because you don't want to waste your time necessarily trying to convince something of someone when they got their fingers in their ears. So it's a combination of being a great role model, a nice person, not judgmental and non-coercive, being well-versed and clear in your worldview, but avoiding the politics like a plague. But being able to make the case. You can't separate Judaism from the Jewish state. We Jews are a nation and we're a faith. You have to be able to articulate that. It's not a separate thing. It's not like a bunch of Khazars who converted 1,000 years ago and were not related to us.
I have to run into the bomb shelter.
Okay.
I'm going to try to take a breath.
I have to go actually soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all very much. You're welcome to be in touch with me.
I just want to tell you something. I have to compliment you. I have to tell you, you are like the way you speak, your genius, your understanding of facts, your clarity, your truth. I have to tell you, I cannot say enough about you.
Thank you.
Literally cannot say enough about you. It is unbelievable. Really, you should continue, and God should give you the strength to be able to get your message across, because we all have to hear it in every way.
Thank you. You should tell my mother that. She'll get more nachas. I have a website, kenspiro.com. You're welcome to check it out. And people are welcome. Maybe Naomi will post it. People are welcome to be in touch with me, ask me questions. I'd be happy to help you if I can. All the best. We should hear good news for the Jews, Rosh Chodesh Tov. And this Pesach, we should be on the Temple Mount doing the Korban Pesach all together as one people.
Thank you. Amazing. Amazing. This was amazing.